What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell.
What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? This is Judah Rad. I'm here with Robo and Ree, and today we have a very special guest. He's written for Marvel, DC, Image, Dark Horse, Dynamite, and pretty much everybody. An awesome Silver Surfer run, a monumental Green Lantern run where he created Kyle Rayner. He's pitted Marvel against DC, Batman against aliens, Green Lantern against aliens, Green Lantern against the Silver Surfer. Ron, can't we all just get along? How's it going?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
awesome.
Sure.
It's great to have you here. So before we get into anything else, they say that you're always hurt by the ones you love, and you did hurt me, Ron. I have your whole Silver Surfer run. I'm a huge fan, but what did Frankie Ray ever do to you?
It's that was actually the first story I wanted to tell when I took over Silver Surfer. I would, because I thought to myself, well, why is Frankie Ray cool with being the Herald of Galactus and leading him to planets that, may or may not be inhabited, that he then devours, and so kind of adjacent to genocide. And I thought, seems like that's not cool. So it was that was the first story that I wanted to get into when I took over the book, but we ended up having a bunch of Infinity Gauntlet crossovers and odds and ends that they wanted me to put into the book. So it ended up like 2 years into my run before we actually dug into that storyline.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, she was very gleeful.
Yeah, but I did do it to hurt you, so.
Okay, fair.
Do it.
He deserves it, so.
It worked.
So you and Ron Lim, you did some awesome Silver Surfer work, and you had a tough act to follow with Jim. What was it like taking the title over from Jim, and what was it like collaborating with him when he was writing his Infinity events?
Well, Jim is one of my best friends, and he's the one that ushered me into comics. So, cool. So it felt pretty natural because Jim had taken me by the hand and led me into Marvel, showed me how to write scripts, taught me basically like exactly what the job is. So it felt natural to do it, but then you kind of take a step back and go, oh wait, I'm like a 23-year-old kid writing Silver Surfer for Marvel.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't have time to really think about, this is kind of a big deal and a big opportunity. I better not screw it up. I just hit the ground running, and obviously I had, when Jim left the Surfer title to go do Infinity Gauntlet and launch the Warlock book, there was a lot of arm twisting on his part, I assume, to get Marvel to let me have the book. And then once they did, my first, 9 issues or something like that were Infinity Gauntlet crossovers. So I was thrown into the deep end of, this is how a shared universe works, and you have to figure out how to tell your stories in between the cracks of other stories.
Yeah.
So, but I was just so excited to be doing it. I didn't really think, this is tough. I didn't know any better. So it was the best training I could have ever had. In playing with other people's toys and making sure that you weren't stepping on toes. So I had no idea that my first year on the book was basic training basically. And then when I got to finally start doing my own stuff, that's when we started to get into Herald Ordeal and some of the other things. Although obviously there was an Infinity crossover, once a year. For the first years of my career.
Yeah. Have you read any of the newer stuff from like Dan Slott or Donny Cates?
Oh yeah. I keep up the Surfer when I can. I'm honestly more of a trade reader than a singles reader because I just can't get to the store as often.
That's right.
As I want, but the Surfer turns out to be one of those characters who's really open to interpretation, very flexible. Dan basically did Doctor Who.
Right.
Donnie's take was not Dan's take and was not my take. But I think you can bring your own imprint to him. And he works as a main character. He works great as a supporting character.
Like Annihilation.
He works really well as a character that you're going to sort of keep a distance from and treat him very much like an alien, which is what he is.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So, after your main run, you did this. You did the one-shot Dangerous Artifacts, which, by the way, Claudio Castellini made it look really beautiful. Was it difficult for you to say goodbye to the Surfer and move on? Or
That wasn't my goodbye to the Surfer, because I had written that like 3 years before.
Oh, okay.
Claudio is a master. He's an amazing artist, and I've done a bunch of different things with him. But I started writing Dangerous Artifacts, midway through my Surfer run, and it just took Claudio like 2 years or 3 years to draw that book, because his process is so painstaking that that book came out after I left the Surfer title. I think it came out after I left the Surfer title, but it had been in the works for years. Claudio literally, this was pre-digital scanning for your pages. You had to bring your pages in, send your pages into the office to get them scanned on a large format scanner. And so Claudio flew from Italy to New York to bring the pages over, because he wasn't going to surrender them to FedEx, and knows what was going to happen to him. Those pages were precious.
That's right.
So he flew over from Rome with those pages on his lap.
Wow.
Then so he was in New York for a week or two, and that's when I met him for the first time. I went into the city and met him. Got to see the pages in person, and they told me afterwards that they ultimately had to physically take the pages out of his hands, because he wouldn't stop noodling with them. He was, putting in fine details and changing things.
Right.
He couldn't let the pages go. So they finally had to take all 48 pages from him and put them in a flat file in the office, put them in an art cabinet and lock it, and say, you're done now.
You're done.
Have to be done now. And then, of course, the edition that came out here, the color saddle-stitched edition, that was just kind of a regular book. The project that actually started under Tom DeFalco's regime at Marvel years before. Tom's the one that kind of discovered Claudio in Italy when he went on a trip over there, probably to the Lucca convention. And that's where he met Claudio, who was working in Italian comics, and the whole deal for the Surfer book came about. By the time the book actually came out, it was a new regime at Marvel. Tom was out, and the new regime at Marvel didn't have any attachment to that particular book. It was just another book that was in the drawer. So, the original plans for that book was that it was going to be an oversized black and white hardcover, like a big lavish edition, and then there was going to be a companion prestige format color book. By the time it came out, it was just a regular saddle stitch comic, no black and white edition. The pages are cropped really badly, like there's heads and hands cut off.
That is something that
so it really, like, it didn't have anybody looking out for it anymore. So when it finally came out, it kind of crushed Claudio, because it was just thrown out onto the market, and it was like 3 years of his life.
Damn.
Thankfully, in the ensuing years, there have been European editions that are oversized hardcover black and white editions, shot from Claudio's originals. So the really awesome editions are Spanish and German, and I think there's a French edition, and the Italian edition initially was a softcover edition. And they all look great because they're all scanned from the originals and just look tremendous. We have kicked around the idea of maybe trying to get another, like a black and white edition over here.
Please
take all my damn words off the pages and just let it be,
an
let it
art
be an
book.
art.
That's awesome.
Cool. Is that your favorite Silver Surfer story that you've written, or?
Probably so, just because of the artwork. I mean, the stuff is just breathtaking. I honestly, I have the new Spanish edition back on the shelves there, and I don't normally pull my stuff off the shelf and look at it. that's one of the books that I pull off the shelf and look at because it's really breathtaking stuff. I know a few years ago, Claudio had an exhibit, I believe, in Spain that had all of the originals on the walls.
Wow.
It would have been amazing to go see that, but hopefully at some point we'll get a black and white edition over here that really shows it off as it should be.
Yeah. That's
Awesome.
Amazing. I know Judah's got another question, but I have to ask: when you go into local comic book stores, do they know who you are? Like, do you pull books off the shelf and go, "I wrote this"? Like,
if I go like my local comic book shop, yeah, they know me because the guys that own them are my friends, and I know the people that work there. And if I go into a back in the days when you could travel to places,
Right.
obviously, you don't do that anymore. But like if I end up in a comic shop in another city, I don't say who I am because that's that's kind of like a dick move.
Yeah.
Hey, I wrote.
I couldn't resist it, honestly. if was in
I
your
promise.
shoes.
Yes, exactly. I promise if I ever get in your shoes, that's exactly how I'll enter every building. Like McDonald's, they're like, get a number 3, and I'll just stare at them and be like, do you know who the fuck I am? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I've been in plenty of shops where I don't say anything because I'm just a customer. I find it interesting. Like if I walk into a shop and you walk into that shop where the guy at the counter doesn't even look up at you, doesn't say anything.
Yeah.
There's no, hey, can I help you? Like that, that's not a good shop.
That's right. That's right.
I don't like going into shops and being ignored. And
That's right.
Because
like you're the inconvenience.
Yeah, like if I'm getting ignored, everybody else is too. So they're not doing themselves any favors for their business.
In the industry,
there's supposed to be community building. There's supposed to be a community that springs up around a comic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most stores are like that. A lot of stores are like that. But once in a while, you go into one of those shops where it's just like, they're not doing anything to make you feel welcome. You got to, especially in the days in which we find ourselves now, you have to build that community. You have to build that outreach. So so the other side of the coin is when I go into a shop that, hey, how are you? Can I help you with something? What kind of books do you like? To me, that's awesome. That's what this community is like most of the time.
Yeah, 100%.
Right on.
I agree.
So what does Kyle Rayner represent to you as a creator?
That's a weird question. It's just to me, he's just a guy. That was the whole purpose in creating Kyle. He was supposed to be the other end of the spectrum from Hal, and Hal is obviously Hal works great as a character. He's a hero before he ever gets the ring. He's a test pilot. He is Chuck Yeager.
Right.
And particularly in the 60s when Hal was created, that was a hugely popular, important archetype. All those, the Mercury 7 and the right stuff. And like that was America,
That's right.
in an absolutely positive way. So, when they gave me and Darryl Banks the chance to create a new Green Lantern, I didn't think there was any reason to create sort of Hal Jordan light. There was no, let's not do the guy who's the hero already. Let's do the other end of the spectrum, which is obviously sort of the everyman character.
Rough around the edges.
Well, just he could be me or you, or he could be any of us. I felt like I wanted to explore what happens when somebody who's not sort of a proto-hero already gets this ring and this responsibility. What happens if just a regular guy gets it? So to me, the archetype was very much, Spider-Man was very much Peter Parker.
Awesome.
I grew up reading Marvel books. I was a Marvel kid to a great extent until I discovered New Teen Titans by Wolfman and Perez. It was kind of like a Marvel book anyway. So I was drawn to that sort of, archetype in that I was interested in what happened to him when he wasn't wearing the costume and he wasn't using the. Could he pay his rent, and did he have a date for Friday night? And in Spider-Man's case, is Aunt May okay, or is she in the hospital with her 15th heart attack? I wanted the character to feel as three-dimensional and as real as possible, so that you cared enough about the character to come back every month to see what happens to him, not just what kind of cool stuff he makes with the ring.
That's right.
So that's really the where the whole impetus came from.
Right.
And
definitely was the coolest construct maker. So win on that.
The rule that we set for ourselves was that he couldn't make the same thing twice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think we stuck to that for like 7 years.
Yeah.
My run on the book with Daryl and all of the other artists that helped us out, Paul Pelletier and Jeff Johnson, Tom Grinberg, and everybody that came in and chipped in on the monthly and all the specials and all that stuff. The goal was to never make the same thing twice. Now, whether it was, if he made a giant robot or something like that, he could make a giant robot, twice, but it had to be completely different looking. It had to be some sort of different look. And honestly, sometimes we were like beating our heads against the wall to just be like, all right.
That was going to be another question. I'm like, to do that for 7 years, really, I'm imagining a Banks being like, why did we make this rule? What is this one? What do I draw now?
Yeah,
like,
I could pass the buck to Daryl and say, well, it's like something. A giant robot, but don't make it like a giant robot that you've drawn before.
Yeah, give him the hard part, right?
You do what you're supposed to do. But the entire 7 years was a ball. It was just great.
That's awesome. So Kyle Rayner was given to you blank slate, right? So Hal Jordan is gonna be a bad guy, and we'll ask a question about that in a second. But and they're like, hey, and I did watch another interview of yours where you said the only parameters they really gave you is that it had to be human and it had to be a male, right? And then was there any other parameters given to you outside of that? Were you just given free reign?
No, there wasn't. I mean, I specifically asked those questions. Can the new Green Lantern be a woman, and can the new Green Lantern be an alien? Yeah. And they were like, no, we want to continue with a male lead. Other than that, whatever we wanted to do, they really let us run with it. And
that's awesome.
So we just, ultimately we just kind of built a character that I wanted to write. That's why his heritage was what it was. I mean, he wound up with black hair because, Hal had brown hair and Alan Scott had blonde hair, and Guy Gardner was kind of a ginger. So, all right, give him black hair because we don't have one of those. And I guess we sort of had one with Jon Stewart, but then he shaved his head after a while anyway. So, so we just wanted to make him as different as possible from everybody that had already been established. So in every way, the uniform, the hair color, it was built from the ground floor up, and they really didn't push back on anything. The costume was a kind of a conglomeration of a bunch of different designs Daryl did, taking pieces from each and then putting it all together. And even the Green Lantern symbol was new and different. We had to kind of talk DC into that. Well, we're going to change everything else. Why don't we change the symbol too?
There you go.
So we just got to run with it, and it was pretty rare when we got reeled back in. They just kind of let us do our thing, which is probably in no small part due to the fact that when the book came out, it sold well. You get a lot more leeway.
So you must know what you're doing. So.
and if the book doesn't sell well, somebody tells you what to do.
That's right. So that kind of answers my follow-up question, which was, if you can do anything different, would you? But it sounds like you were able to do everything you wanted anyway without limitations.
Looking back and regretting, the things that you didn't do, I think, never makes any sense.
Sure.
If I have one regret, it's that we only had 3 issues for Emerald Twilight to sort of, Hal's downfall, really is over pretty quick. It's it's 3 issues, one of which was double sized. So we're talking about 70 or 80 pages total. Ideally, I would have loved to have 6 issues for that, but those were not the cards we were dealt.
That's right. Perfect segue.
You gotta start the storyline in issue 48, and it's got to be over with by 50, and then you can have your own toy and play with it and do what you want. But this is what we need you to do in these 3 issues.
Nice. Yeah, like you said, Robo, perfect segue. How did you feel about Jeff Johns retconning Parallax into a cosmic being affecting Hal Jordan rather than just a traumatized Jordan? Like, how did you feel?
Look, this whole business, you stand on the shoulders of the people that came before you.
Yeah.
So if you're going to get, I don't know, ultimately I just kind of feel like it's all made up stories. Who cares?
Nice.
So I told my stories, and my stories are still there. And Jeff told his stories, and they were good, and his stories are still there. I don't get caught up. I didn't get caught up in the continuity of stuff when I was writing Green Lantern, so I'm certainly not going to get caught up in the continuity of how all that played out now. We had I guess a decade when Kyle was he was the only Green Lantern, maybe more than a decade. That's a pretty good run for any character, and then Hal came back, and they've done really good stuff with him, and they're still doing really good stuff with him, and Kyle's still around, so it's made up stories, and you get to pick the one you want.
I feel that's pretty common. It's something that we've heard a lot with regard to the difference between the writers and the fans' perspective and their attachment to continuity. Would you say that's pretty common for, as far as creators, to be like, I'm not worried about continuity, I just want to tell my story, and it's the fans who are kind of latches onto continuity?
I think so. I once you're on this side of the table and you start doing this as your job, you get a peek behind the curtain a little bit.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
It certainly, you certainly have a different perspective once you're on this side of the table. Are there creators who are really, concerned about the continuity, and, you didn't do right by that character, and yeah, totally. And as soon as we turn the camera off, I'll give you a list of who those people are.
Yes.
You're playing with somebody else's toys. Ultimately, even Kyle is not my toy. He's not ours. DC owns them, and they'll do whatever they want with them. And that going in, you understand that that's the situation whenever you do work for hire. It's ultimately not yours. You might get, some say-so for a while, but then somebody else comes in and does their thing. To me, ultimately, none of this stuff makes sense as a cohesive story.
Right.
Like Batman around in 1939 when FDR was president, and he's still here. He's like 35 years old.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So Ron, what is the experience like making your 2 adopted children, the Surfer and the Green Lantern, duke it out? Is that kind of fun?
It's the best thing in the world. Crossovers are like the most fun you can have in comics, and I've been blessed to do a number of them. The Surfer Green Lantern one just was very natural because I was writing both titles at the same time. Obviously, those were the days when you could be writing a book for Marvel and a book for DC. It was not that unusual. Now it doesn't happen that often.
Such a unique experience that's even among creators, getting to write 2 characters from the big 2 publishers and then write a comic book that contains both of them.
Both of them, right?
It's like very rare experience.
It was, it was cool, and it was very easy. Because I think I probably said to DC, hey, why don't we do this? Because I kind of know both characters, and obviously at that point, DC and Marvel had a very good relationship with each other. They were doing a lot of crossovers. This seemed a very obvious one. Both books were selling pretty well, so it wasn't like, often when you do a crossover, you want the books to be on sort of a commensurate sales level, so you're not helping the other guy too much.
That's right. That's right.
So I think we got it approved in like a couple of days. We just, we said, hey, let's do this, and they went, yeah, okay, that sounds like a good idea.
What's the big barrier against stuff like that today? Like you would think that, especially given sales, that some sort of giant. I mean, just Donny Cates vaguely referencing gods of another world, and then the art is the streaks of, oh, there's a red, there's a green, there's Green Lantern. It looks like that like blew up Twitter. Like, what stops it now? I feel like that's a cash grab. I mean, in a good way.
Well, when we did this stuff, 20, 25 years ago, it was just comic books. Now they are multimedia billion-dollar properties.
Movies,
so as
TVs,
stuff
cartoons,
as stuff gets as stuff gets more valuable, and obviously all of this stuff is hugely more valuable now than it was then. In real dollars and cents, in real financial terms. It's a lot more difficult to have these things come together because you're not just dealing with publishing. You're these are multi-platform, multi-billion-dollar franchises that they don't want the other guy to have access to. I mean, if you're Marvel, right, and your movies kick ass and make billions of dollars, and DC's movies are still trying to find their way to a certain extent, like, why would you let them play with your toys?
Right. Why help them out?
That's on a corporate level. That's obviously what the thinking is. On a publishing level, look, everybody would love to do this stuff.
That's right.
Things have to be. You have to need the other guy more than you dislike the other guy for these things to happen. And right now, I don't think they need each other enough.
Neither one needs each other. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when we did Marvel versus DC, the market was tanking and shops were closing. So there was a distinct need and a distinct desire to have these, have something in the shops that could keep the shops open. Necessity is the mother of invention in this case. That's when things are desperate is when everybody plays nice.
Makes sense. Okay. Makes sense. So, you answer the question on DC and Marvel. So here's a silly tongue-in-cheek question, but I would really like a serious answer. Given your special experience dealing with both companies and writing for two not small characters in the least, I just need your answer. No finances, no licensing problems, everything else off the table. DC and Marvel actually go head-to-head, not because some two gods are mad at each other, but because they really need to win this war. Who wins?
No
holds barred.
Probably DC.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Probably DC.
All right, guys. Thank you for coming to our show. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, just in terms of the power levels of the characters, right?
Speed Force.
Yes.
DC's are probably a little bit more powerful. And it kind of, like a serious answer to the question is most of DC's characters were, recreated in the Silver Age, late 50s, early 60s, when Hal Jordan and Barry Allen took on those mantles, and, Ray Palmer's The Flash, and there's a new version of Hawkman. And so that's really, those versions are to a great extent what DC is now, along with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, who are basically the same characters they've been since they were introduced.
Right.
Those characters being sort of early 60s introductions, the Marvel characters came about just a few years later. But they're completely different. Like, the Marvel characters are all they're all flawed in some way. The DC characters all have external flaws. For Green Lantern, it's yellow, and for Superman, it's kryptonite.
Yeah.
For Martian Manhunter, it's fire. There's a thing that hurts them, but it's not them. They don't have any internal flaws. They're sort of paragon virtuous characters. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think we need those kind of characters too. But all the Marvel characters were cut from a different cloth. All the Marvel characters have some sort of internal flaw that they have to overcome. Spider-Man chiefly, and also obviously being a nerd, and
insecure with his powers. Yeah,
he's just a kid. He's just he's not ready for this, and he screws up and gets his Uncle Ben killed. Iron Man's got a bad heart, and Thor has to walk with a cane when he's Don Blake, and and his dad doesn't like him anyway. Daredevil's a blind lawyer. Like everybody in those early Marvel comics has some sort of thing they have to overcome, but it's not external. I mean, obviously it's external in that they're fighting Doctor Doom or whoever.
Sure.
But they're all dealing with like some sort of internal flaw, and the characters are still. That's kind of how they are now too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting that there's only a couple of years difference in when they were created, but there's a vast gulf in terms of what the core of those characters is like. It's awesome. And it's certainly something that I was very aware of, having started my career at Marvel and then going over to DC, which is probably why Kyle ended up being basically a Marvel character in the DC universe.
That's awesome.
That was such a good answer.
Yeah.
So before, at the start of the interview, you were talking about how you were too young and sort of working too hard to take stock and realize, oh, I'm in this amazing situation right now. How did you feel writing a Darth Maul miniseries and Darth Maul versus Darth Vader? Was that surreal, being a child of Star Wars and writing that stuff? What was that like?
That was the coolest thing ever. I mean, obviously, I saw Star Wars in the theater when it was released in 1977.
Wow.
And I was 11 and a half years old. I was almost 12. So I was the perfect age to see that movie on a big screen when there was nothing else in the world. Mm-hmm. I mean, that summer, I people who weren't around for it just can't even grasp how big a deal Star Wars was that summer. Mm-hmm. Just culturally, everywhere. It was the biggest thing in the world. Nothing else mattered. It was all Star Wars the entire year. So it obviously had a huge impact on me. Maybe I would still be doing what I'm doing if I didn't see Star Wars at the magic age. But certainly the fact that I did see it at that magic age helped quite a bit and pushed me in that direction. So when I got the opportunity to write Star Wars, I mean, I love Marvel Comics and I love DC Comics and Edgar Rice Burroughs and Robert E. Howard, but right at the top of the food chain is Star Wars. So when I got the chance to do it was, I mean, it's definitely pinch yourself stuff, and you want to be cool, calm, and professional about it.
Right. No big deal.
So as soon as I get off the phone, do you
I was about to ask, do you dance? Do you have a drink? What do you do?
Well, you just, all of those things.
Yeah.
You just don't, you get up and walk around because did that really just happen?
Right.
So for me, when I started my career in comics, Star Wars was kind of in a fallow period. This was prequels. Episodes 1, 2, and 3 weren't even a gleam in George's eye when I started doing comics. And there were some Star Wars comics. The Dark Horse had the license, and they were doing a bit here and there. But it was not a thing that was everywhere. It was kind of for a fairly dedicated hardcore audience. And in the mid '90s, when I signed a exclusive contract with DC. A couple of years into working with DC, we worked on an exclusive contract, and it was great. Very much appreciated, and it was very good for me. Literally, 2 or 3 days after I signed the exclusive contract with DC, Dark Horse calls and says, "We're starting a monthly Star Wars comic. Finally, miniseries. We're going to start a monthly Star Wars comic, and you're going to write it." Whew. And I was like,
you cried inside, died a
no,
little.
I'm not.
Sorry, DC. We have a problem.
Yeah. It was pretty wretched. So like the job that I would have crawled across broken glass for, I couldn't take because I had just signed this contract. So eventually, once I was off of my DC contract, I did. I think my first Star Wars stuff was Star Wars Tales #1. We did a Darth Vader story with Claudio Castellini, which is still one of my favorite gigs ever. So I got to, that was my Star Wars intro, and then ended up doing the Darth Maul series and wrote Empire for a while and a bunch of specials, and I still love all that stuff. It was just it was really dream come true stuff, and
cool.
man, I would love to do it again. It was some of the easiest writing I've ever done because it was weird to do that stuff because you know how everybody sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like back then you didn't know that Captain America sounded like Chris Evans,
Right.
or sounded like Chris Hemsworth.
That's right.
This was back in the days when like the best Marvel could do was Lou Ferrigno painted green.
That's right. That's right.
The cinematic universe didn't exist, so like those were still just comic book characters.
That's right.
So writing, Darth Vader and Luke and Han, like their dialogue was just the easiest thing in the world to write because you knew how those characters sounded. You knew what their inflections were like and what the reactions were like. It was almost like having a shortcut to write because you just kind of wound up the characters and let them go.
Wow.
So Ree has what's probably the most important question of the entire interview. But before that, we asked the question of Heather Antos and Kieran Gillen about the difficulty, or if it was difficult at all, to write a character in which there's been so much established lore, and for a title in which the controllers of the story are gonna, give priority to the movie. Like you can't tell the story because that's movie material type stuff. When you're doing writing anything about Darth Vader, or when you did your Darth Maul miniseries, was it hard to like operate within the parameters of Disney?
Editorial. Yeah.
No, it was actually easier.
Okay.
My experience was that the Star Wars continuity actually made sense. Like start to finish, millennia ago into the future. Like there was an actual timeline where stuff took place and where the movies were and the novels were, and this is all expanded universe stuff, obviously. But it generally made sense because stuff could be dropped into the timeline where it needed to be.
Right.
You weren't dealing with real time like Marvel and DC were, right? So there was no like Darth Vader wasn't a Sith Lord when FDR was president and when Reagan was president. And
Right.
So
Right.
Deal with those aspects of continuity that just never made any sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that
I never thought of it like that.
I found that the Star Wars stuff was actually a bit easier to navigate because there was a timeline that you could consult, and actually it was it made sense as a through line, and a lot of times when you're doing comics for license where they don't know comics, you run into problems because they don't know how you do what you do, and there's odd stuff that gets pushed down the chain, and sometimes it's a real pain. Lucasfilm understood comics. They liked comics. They were extremely helpful in putting together the comics. And I found that once you would kind of gain their confidence, the approvals department, once you would kind of gain their confidence, they kind of let you do what you do. If they trusted you, you got a little bit more, leeway.
Makes sense.
And fairly early on, I figured out that they trusted me because I wasn't getting any pushback outlines or stories that we pitch or anything like that. They're like, yeah, just do this. If anything, I mean, Dark Horse kind of skewed when I wrote Empire, the monthly Empire book. One of the things that we ended up not disagreeing over, but there was sort of a push-pull over it, was that I wanted to do stories about, Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and Darth Vader, and I wanted to do stories about the people that you cared about. Right. And it's a lot easier to do stories about the third Stormtrooper from the left because he doesn't have any continuity. Like, you can just do those sorts of really not even secondary characters, like tertiary characters. Mm-hmm. You can sort of deal with them a lot easier. But I said, look, I want to write about the characters that everybody else cares about. So I'm willing to jump through the continuity hoops to figure out where these stories get placed. Right. And Dark Horse was like, all right, if you want to push that rock up the hill, go ahead. And it really was not a terrible problem. I mean, once I think when I took over the book, I went to Barnes and Noble and just bought like the biggest stack of all of those Star Wars essential guides that had everything, like all of the timelines, all of the continuity, all the expanded universe stuff. So and I could write them off on my taxes because they were
there it is.
Nice. No dummy. So yeah, there was some extra research involved, and but once you had figured out where you could tell your stories, it wasn't, I got to, write Luke and write Leia and write Han and Chewie. And I'm really happy with all of the Star Wars stuff that I did.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So my most important question, because you're the versus master, obviously we need to ask you this question. Darth Maul versus Boba Fett, who wins and why?
Well, I mean, in the scheme of things, they both died sort of loser deaths, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well, one didn't trip and fall, so.
Darth kind of got cut in half, and Boba Fett turned into an hors d'oeuvre for well, let's say it, a sand vagina.
Right.
So all right, as somebody who has a full-size Darth Maul statue in his basement, I guess I have to say Darth Maul, because the idea of Boba Fett was always cooler than the execution of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, congratulations. That is the right answer.
I think it's the right answer. Yeah, I think it's the right answer. Although, we'll see what happens on The Mandalorian, which I really enjoy the hell out of.
Yeah,
that's great.
And like all of the characters on The Mandalorian are much cooler than Boba Fett. So,
but Ron, what do you have to do in life to be known galaxy wide for disintegrations?
Well, not trip and fall into a giant sand.
Hey.
Okay, so
that giant Darth Maul. Sorry to interrupt, but do you dress him up for holidays and stuff? Like, what does he do down there?
He's kind of in your basic black all the time.
Yeah.
What he does do is scare the hell out of repairmen when they come to deal with the basement pump and the furnace down there, and I forget to warn them that by the way, there's a 6-foot statue down there.
Just some faint voices like, "Oh shit, what the fuck?" That's nice. So moving into a title that's a little, maybe a little less known, Avian 9. Avian 9 seemed to be pretty promising.
This might be the first time I've ever been asked about Avian 9 in an interview.
Well, I wish I had his name offhand right now, so I'd give credit to the guy who asked it. But there's a fan of yours in one of our Facebook groups, and we sometimes we'll put out there, Nathan. Yeah. So sometimes we put out there that like, hey, this is who's coming on the show. Does anybody have any questions? And he wanted to know what happened to Avian 9. He really liked the direction it was going in. Could you provide any insight on why that run came to an end? Was it sales or something else?
The whole company just sort of disappeared. It was a book that we were doing for an Indian company that wanted to publish comics, and I've done a number of projects for Indian companies, and I think I was hired at Virgin Comics, which had a fairly large footprint in India, to do some editing on a number of their titles and to do a little bit of writing too. And that just kind of put me in touch with Indian publishers and Indian talent, and some of whom I'm still working with on freelance projects. So Avian 9 came about because some of the artists that I had worked with on projects for Virgin ended up working on some of that stuff, and they recommended me, and they got in touch and asked me to kind of Svengali the whole thing together. And it was pretty cool stuff for a few issues. It was a very imaginative world. The creative teams were really good. It was, and I have since worked with like most of the artists that were on that material. Have done stuff over here with me. It was cool stuff. It just maybe was probably a little premature in terms of finding an audience in the Indian market, but it was. I've done enough stuff in the Indian market that obviously a lot of it is really mythologically based, and so the sort of Western mythology that we all are familiar with and is kind of part of our storytelling DNA. The Greek and Roman myths, which are, to a great extent the same stuff, but Norse mythology and like all of that Western stuff has nothing to do with what they do there. And the Indian mythology and cosmology is hugely expansive and fascinating and just wild, and in comparison to what we're used to. And I'm always like, wait, he's like a monkey god, and like there's another dude that's just blue because, and like it was a crash course for me to learn all of this stuff, and now I really dig a lot of it. It's amazing. It's amazing storytelling, and the fact that that population really knows it inside and out, and it's sort of the core basis for their storytelling traditions. It's a really cool world to kind of poke your head into, and while at the same time knowing that you're never gonna fully grasp it as they do, because that's they've been getting these myths, these stories from the cradle.
Do you think there's a chance that especially since given that, because I'll be honest with you, I wasn't super familiar with it. I'm asking it because the fan asked it. But given what you just said, now after I'm done hearing, I'm like, I really want this story. Is this so? A lot of times, what we're seeing nowadays, especially when you look at American Gods, and we can divine this ramp up in popularity towards telling stories that are not confined to Western mythology. You think, who owns the rights to that? Is that something that you might bring to the United States?
I have no idea who owns it. I actually still, I'm still like on social media with the CEO who has moved on to different things, but it was cool stuff. And obviously, just like putting it on Comixology or putting it on the web somewhere, it's the easiest thing in the world to do, to have people access your stuff. There's a lot of content out there that was sort of pre-comics internet, that is, it's in some spots here and there. Avian 9 I don't think is, and there's some really cool stuff that came out of that. So maybe I'll poke some of those guys to see who exactly might have access to it.
Cool. So
you got
I'm
right here.
I'm gonna give a shout out real quick. So my father is from Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. His name is Jay Wiener, and he kind of got me into comics without getting me into comics. He would, when I'm was a little boy, he'd like read me tell me a bedtime story, but he'd be telling me the story of the Richards family or the Silver Surfer, and just kind of passing it off as his story. But like it wasn't until later in life, and I was like, oh, these are comic books. But he had a question for me. He had a question for me to ask you. So obviously DeGrom is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. Do you think it's going to be unanimous?
Man, let's hope. I'd settle for him just making the opening day start because he had tight back muscles the other night. But it's so for real. The question is first ballot Hall of Famer. I mean, if he stays healthy and does what he does, he's never going to compile the number. Nobody's ever going to get 300 wins anymore. That's just not a thing that's going to happen in baseball. Mm-hmm. But if he has another 3 or 4 seasons as dominant as the last 2 that he's had, yeah, he's going to the Hall of Fame. But it's such a huge question mark. I told you guys earlier, like I've got my fantasy league baseball draft tonight. You have no idea if they're going to play, 60 games or 30, 15, and call it off. It's such an unknown. Yeah. But I'm just happy to have. Obviously, I hope all of the players and all the staff and the umpires, everybody stays safe because this is a risk. But I'm really glad to have baseball.
Are you going to draft Pete Alonso for your fantasy team?
It's actually a keeper. So it's an NL only keeper league. Mm-hmm. So you build your team from year to year, and the draft tonight is just for new players and players that have come over from the American.
Awesome.
So we have our typical final question there. But before we get to it, a little bit controversial. You don't have to answer it if you're not. We'll cut it out, and it'll be like we never asked it if you don't want to answer it. But so kind of what's hot on Twitter right now is Dynamite allowing a pretty outspoken comic skater and self-proclaimed anti-SJW. I think Cecil says it goes by the Twitter handle Dickin Comics. He did a cover for Vampirella with one of his characters. Knowing your relationship with Dynamite, would you like to comment?
Yeah, fuck that guy, Cecil.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in Dynamite. I have done work for them in the past. You're judged by the company you keep, and look, sometimes honest mistakes get made, and you don't know who you're dealing with in terms of letting a guy do a cover or hiring somebody to do some work for you. I guess disappointment is my chief reaction right now. Mm-hmm. We'll see if this kind of thing happens again. I mean, I did see the page from that guy Cecil's book, who I think I've had blocked for a long time now. So I was blissfully unaware of any of this stuff because, if I've blocked or muted you, you just don't exist to me.
That's it. Right. That's it.
Yeah. Cultivate your own garden. But I did see some of the material that apparently is his work, and it was just some pretty wretched stuff. So
it's bad.
Yeah,
if
he's terrible.
Look, if they want to, if they want to do their, circle jerk of selling each other lousy comics, great. I don't care.
Sure.
It's
capitalism.
It's not my. It's whatever they do in terms of making comics is none of my concern. When they start being assholes to people and continuing to just, be problem children, mm-hmm. That's when it's our problem. And if you engage with that, and if you're adjacent to that, I really just don't have any use for you.
That's right.
It's not that hard being a decent human being, and if you can't do that, I just don't want you in my sphere.
I hate to break the news to you, but apparently that means that we're now soy boys. I don't know what that means, but that's us now. So I don't know.
Whatever. A bunch of pasty nerds in their basements are not exactly the encapsulation.
not the arbiters of who is
manliness. Cool or not. Yeah, adulthood.
Go out on a date some night, fellas. Get away from me.
Got him.
So shifting it from bad comics to good comics, what can you tell us about your current and future projects? Do you have anything juicy that you can announce?
I've got a bunch of stuff I could announce and then probably get thrown off of the projects because I blabbed about them. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff coming up for later in the year that's not announced yet, and early next year.
Can you say publisher?
Nope.
Okay.
Because the publisher would be annoyed if I did that.
Got it.
Okay.
Or publishers would be annoyed if I did that. I can tell you that our Kickstarter for Beasts of the Black Hand Volume 2 is live right now on Kickstarter, which is the sequel to the hardcover graphic novel that I did with my buddies Paul Harding and Matthew Dow Smith, which is kind of a diesel punk espionage horror adventure set right after World War One.
Awesome.
With monsters.
That's pretty dope. That's pretty dope.
So we're kickstarting the sequel right now, and we'll do another oversized hardcover package for it. And I'm in the midst of writing that right now, and Matt is drawing it. First batch of pages is up on the Kickstarter page. So that's one of the things that I can tell you about that I'm doing. And I was actually just making a list of projects today that, like, oh yeah, I can't talk about really any of these, but there's stuff coming. We'll have to do this all again when I can actually talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely,
100%. For the friendly neighborhood nerds at home watching this interview, the link to the Kickstarter will be in the description section of this video, so make sure you check that out.
Hell yeah.
So this has been, 2020 sucks. I think everybody agrees on that. I think that's the one thing that is universally agreed upon, is that 2020 is terrible. And it's been bad for human beings, but it's also been bad for Comic-Cons and events and stuff like that. So it looks like cons aren't or shouldn't be coming back anytime soon, at least not until the world is significantly different. What are your thoughts, feelings about that?
Yeah, it's not look, I don't want to be in a room with a bunch of you people.
That's right. Yeah. Mask or no mask at this point.
Want to be in the room with a bunch of us, right?
Yeah.
It's the only decision you can make. So, like, all of my shows for the year have been canceled except one. There's one in December, Awesome Con in DC. We'll see what happens. It's too soon right now to make a call one way or the other. But literally every other show that I was supposed to do this year got scrapped. There's no other way around it. I did a show in Dallas in February. So that might, who knows, that might be my one show for the year. Mm-hmm. And it's tough on everybody. It's tough on the show promoters who are not losing, or who are losing money by not being able to put the events on. It's tough for artists and writers who are used to doing the convention circuit and having that be part of their income. And for some artists, certainly that's a significant part of their income.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's tough all the way around, and I miss doing it. I really miss the international shows. Last year I was able to go to England, Ireland, Scotland, Saudi Arabia, Kenya, South Africa.
Wow.
Just amazing places, and meet people that obviously you would never have the chance to interact with. Just it's one of my favorite things about what I do is this wonderful bonus of being able to
connect, go
to Dublin and go to Riyadh, go to Cape Town and Johannesburg.
That's awesome.
Go to Nairobi, and have these experiences, but all of that's on hold for the foreseeable future. And I would think, obviously other countries aren't going to be letting us in at any point in the near future. So
they shouldn't.
So if Canada doesn't want us, nobody else wants us.
That's right. That's right.
So it's gonna take a while, and I have to think that we're really not going to be back to normal until there's a vaccine.
That's right.
Because it's
this
just
is
too
the new
risky
normal.
to put that many. Yeah, it's too risky to put that many people in a place and have them all on top of each other. So
yeah.
hopefully we can do that soon, and 2021's a little bit more back to normal, but everybody's got to stay safe.
There's certain leadership changes could help speed up that process, possibly.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice to have somebody that actually believes in science running the show for a change.
That's right.
Believes in science, or values human life, any of those things.
Whichever.
Human decency and empathy. Those would be
right.
Those would be a
I'm
nice
confused, guys. What are you guys talking about right now? I don't know what you're. Ron Marz, motherfucking Ron Marz. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel we are. Yep, she wrote it down just in case. That's the sign. Like, don't forget to thank him. No. But honestly, yeah, I know that. I know, especially with the project that you talked about. You've got to be a busy individual, so thank you for sharing your time with us and the fans that are out there. Last words, yours?
Just everybody stay safe. You guys included. I really enjoyed this. This was great. But let's everybody hunker down and stay safe and wear your damn mask.
Wear your mask.
Wear the mask.
Take it easy.
IFLC, please like, subscribe, ring the bell, and be free. Follow our links and watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests and sometimes it's just us, but we're also cool.